Welcome to SQL for Absolute Beginners course, lesson 9.2. So we'll continue our where clause that we looked at in the previous lesson, and now we'll see how we can apply multiple conditions. Now before we go there, let's refresh something quick and simple that we learned about in mathematics, which is called Venn diagram. Now what does this show is, let's say we have two sets, set A and set B. Set A includes three values, 1, 2 and 3, and set B has another three values, 3, 4, 5. Now if, as you can see in this Venn diagram, it's easy to see, but if some question comes up as what is the data available when I want it from set A and set B together, so it should belong to set A as well as set B, then the answer will be 3, because 3 is the only value that belongs to both of the sets. And if I switch the question to show me the data in set A or set B, then the answer will be anything that belongs to A as well as anything that belongs to B will be the output. That means we'll get 5 values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now why are we looking at this? Because we are going to use multiple conditions as we discussed for where clause, and in the multiple conditions we have to be very careful of how we use our and versus or conditions, because as you can see, if you switch one to another, either you will end up getting either, let's say, 1 row versus 5 rows or vice versa. So let's look at the example now. So I have brought the same table that we use, phone book table. There are 3 records we inserted. Now let's say we want to apply a condition where the name should be Henry Ford, and I also want to make sure that the ID should be 1. Now why are we doing it? Well, currently I'm using ID condition, but it could be phone number, it could be anything else that we can apply. So this is a simple example. So basically the point is it should match on 2 different columns. That's what we are trying to do here. One is the name should match as this, and ID, that's another column, should match with this value. If we run this and if it matches, we'll see the output. If not, then it will basically not show any output. Now same way we can still use the same conditions that we use Henry and then %sign. Now the key concept here is the way you use AND condition or condition. So now let's look at this. If I say bring me anything where it says Henry like, but then ID should be 2 because I put AND, that means it has to make sure that both the conditions are met. This is the key concept. Whenever you use AND word, that means it will match anything that matches this, it will keep aside, and then in those records additionally it will say, well, do I see anything that also has ID equals 2? If you see this output, you think Henry name is here, but that ID is 1 and that's the only record. So if I run this command, the output should be there shouldn't be any output, meaning no rows found. Now similarly we can still use Henry %sign, but instead of AND, now we change it to OR. Now this OR condition will say, okay, I find something called this name as well as in addition to. See, it's not within that. Now anything else, so it will go back to the table and say anybody with ID also equals 2, I will take it, no matter what the name is at that time. So each condition is evaluated separately and then both of them will be combined as an output. Now the third option we can provide is we can also say something used like a between. These are normally used for dates, like I want to see between date from January through March or something like that. We don't have date field right now, but it's fine. We can use the numeric field. So what we'll say is show me the data where ID is between 1 and 2. Now when we say 1 and 2, it will include equals 1 and equals 2 and anything in between. So the between is either applied using the date type field, or it will be also applicable when it is integer or basically numeric fields. Alright, so let's go and actually see this in action. So we have these commands in our workbench, and as you can see, the very first one is, of course, we'll say use addition, control enter, that means it will start using it. The next command is the one we executed. So we have Henry Ford and ID equals 1. Now before we go there, let's do this simple. Let's run just select command so we know all the records. So obviously we should expect, when I say show me with this name and ID equals that, we know that first record should show up. So let's add this condition now and run this command, and as you can see, only first row is showing up. I mean ID 1 is showing up. If I say this, show me anything with that name, but it should have ID equals 2, because I'm saying it has to have it, this as well as that, meaning both the conditions should match. Let's see what we get. Nothing. 0 rows return. Obviously we know that there is nothing like ID is 2 and the name is Henry. Now if we say or, watch what happens now. So because it found one record for this condition wherever it found the name Henry, and then it went back to the table and say anybody with ID equals to show me. So it found another record, and now it shows me both the records. So this is how that Venn diagram, either you will get only one record or all the records type of scenario you can see here. So basically you have to be careful what are you expecting here. Now let's say between is again very simple, but you have to also make sure what is your range. Basically it will start from here including this value, and it will continue up to this. If I switch 2 to 3 now, for example, then it will include 1, 2 and 3 as an output, and as you can see ID is 1, 2, 3 is coming out. Now you can also do this. Let's say we say where ID is 1 or ID is 2. Again it is as good as between, but in this case it will just show 2 records wherever this is applicable. The between is basically sequential. So if I had said between 1 and 30, then it will continue entering 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 30. While in this case ID 1 or ID 30, let's say if we had it, then only those 2 conditions will be matched. The numbers in the between ones like 2, 3, 4, they will not be considered. So just keep that in mind. And if I say show me something which has ID equals 1 and ID equals 2, now obviously this cannot happen because only one value can be part of ID. But let's say somebody wrote this query and we try to execute. Obviously we know what should be the output, 0 rows, because there is no such condition that will satisfy, there is no row that will satisfy this condition where ID is 1 as well as ID is 2, because that's an AND here. If we ran OR, as you saw, either one is fine and each row will be evaluated individually. So that's about the conditions, multiple conditions. These again are very powerful use of the where clause using these multiple. Now I also want to add something quick. So you can do this and we can add to this as additional conditions. So it's not, you are not restricted to, so we can say ID equals 1 or ID equals 2 or name equals or name like, and let's say Henry. So if we do this command, then what it will do is it will evaluate each one individually and it will show us from that perspective. So now you can see it found ID equals 1 or ID equals 2, so those 2 are there, and it also found Henry within it, so there is no extra record we need to show. But if we had this ID equals 1 or 3 and then we say show me this, now we should expect 1 and 3 because 1 still matches. So let's change this 1 to 2 and not 3, right? So if we run this command, now it will try to run for ID is 2 or ID is 3 or name is Henry. So now we should get actually 3 records because each row is satisfied by one of these conditions. So basically you can combine multiple conditions into one. In fact, you can also do a combination. So let's do it this way. So if I can say do ID equals 1 or ID equals 2, so I'll put this in parentheses and watch what happens. And then I will change this or to AND. So let's see what happens. So we are saying give me something that has ID 1 or 2, so it will 1 or 3, sorry. So it will bring us 2 rows in this case because it's an OR statement. Now out of those 2 rows, it will try to match additionally where it should have name like this Henry. If that is the case, so only 1 row will be applicable, and if we run this command, now you will be able to see only 1 row because all these conditions can only be satisfied with this row, that it has id equals 1 and name equals that, because id equals 3 does not satisfy this name condition. So the combination is another powerful tool. So where you put your parentheses, where you put your or condition, where you put your and condition, all of that will matter in your output. Now the good thing is, all you are playing with is just the output, but we will see in the coming lecture, in the lessons, that we can also control the data by updating it or by deleting it. So when we have to do it, we'll still use these commands to identify which are those records that we need to modify basically. And if we don't apply this properly, then we might end up with a wrong data updated or deleted, which is not the best way to do it. So please be careful on how you use it. Try to think logically that what should this output be. Maybe you can play it by individually running the conditions and then combining it so that you can see how it works, and go back to that Venn diagram concept if you want to understand like what should be the output of this. So that will help you. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll continue the next lesson with additional control, and that will be how do we sequence or order the output of record. That's a very simple command, but again it is also going to be very helpful. So see you there. Until keep practicing SQL. Thank you.